Like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. And after agreeing with the laborers for the usual daily wage, he sent them into his vineyard. And when he went out about 9 o'clock, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace. And he said to them, "You also go into the vineyard, and I will pay you whatever it is right." So they went. When he went out again about noon, and about 3 o'clock, he did the same. And about 5 o'clock, he went out and found others standing around. And he said to them, "Why are you standing idle here all day?" And they said to him, "Because no one has hired us." And so he said to them, "You also go into the vineyard." Now when evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his manager, "Call the laborers and give them their pay, beginning with the last and then going to the first." When those hired about 5 o'clock came, each of them received the usual daily wage. Now when the first came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received the usual daily wage. And when they received it, they grumbled against the landowner, saying, "These last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat." But he replied to one of them, "Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for the usual daily wage? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give to this last the same as I have given to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or are you envious because I am generous? So the last shall be first, and the first shall be last." So, I had my high school reunion in September of last year. Yeah, my 50th. Graduated in 1969. Yeah, so when I told that to some of the kids that I work with at the meat department, they said, "Well, who was all there? Was Benjamin Franklin there, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and Jefferson, were they there?" I said, no, they weren't there, but yeah, it's about 50 years ago, and you'll be, hopefully celebrating your 50th high school reunion sometime. But anyway, after the high school reunion, I decided to start a group called the 69ers, and we're a group of guys that live in basically the Schaumburg area. I live in Itasca, about 8 or 10 of us. And we meet every second Saturday of the month at Maxfield's in Schaumburg there, where Plum Grove Road, I think, intersects with Schaumburg Road. 9 o'clock in the morning, and we just sit around and we talk about, our lives and catch up and talk about what's going on and that type of thing. And one of the guys that's there, his name is Steve. And Steve, God bless him, is a Vietnam veteran. I think last time I saw Steve, before he went off to Vietnam, he was working in some pet store there in Elk Grove, right off Beesterfield Road. But he went to Vietnam. And he shows the scars for it too. He's got shrapnel wounds in his legs, and his arms, and his hands, and other parts of his body, God bless him. He also suffers from Agent Orange. He had bladder cancer, so he was able to survive that. And the last time we met, I asked him, "Steve," I said, "you were in Vietnam for, I think, a full tour, about a year, I think." Yeah, he says, "Yeah, about a year, that was enough." And I said, "Do you remember your first combat experience?" He says, "Yeah, I remember it clear as day." And he went on to explain to us what war was like, and his very first combat experience. He said, "Our platoon was here, 2 other platoons were over here. The Viet Cong were coming up to us through this valley." And then he said, "I remember my very first experience when the bullets start to fly." He says, there were snipers, there were hand grenades, there were all sorts of things going on, and people getting blown up, and I was just doing what I had to do and told what to do, trying to keep alive. And he says, right before the shooting started, a chaplain flew in on a helicopter and gave everybody, the service and the mass. And then as the helicopter took off, it got shot down and everybody had got killed, including the chaplain. I'm going to myself, oh my God, you know, that's what war is like. It's brutal. So he went on for about 15 or 20 minutes and just shared to us what he was experiencing during his first combat experience, because I've never experienced that. And gladly, I mean, I try to avoid the Vietnam War, staying at SIU. But then he said, you know, I came back and got into the business world. And let me tell you guys, the business world can be just like a combat experience. It can be just as ruthless sometimes, except there's not live bullets and not live hand grenades and things coming at you that'll kill you physically, but it's a dog-eat-dog world out there sometimes. And you know, you have goals and objectives, but you know, it may kill your spirit, these things that people do, taking pot shots at you and snipers from there. And he says it can be just as dangerous as being in combat, but the things that people do can sometimes kill your spirit, they can sometimes kill your emotions, they sometimes can kill you know, you psychologically or whatever. And he says, yeah, that's what the working world is all about. And to some extent, that's true. I mean, I think we've all experienced some of that to some extent in the business world. And so, when I read today's gospel, and I remember reading that parable of the vineyard the very first time about this businessman who owns this vineyard, and he does all this crazy stuff. He goes out indiscriminately and just gathers these people, piles them into the back of his truck, takes them over to the vineyard. He doesn't care who they are, what they're dressed like, where they came from. He just says, go and work. And he picks them up at all different times of the day. And then at the very end, he pays them all the same wage. Now, I can understand that this guy did it for maybe one day because he wanted to get things done. But then I said to myself, if this is the way this guy runs his business on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis, he's not going to survive. He won't survive doing crazy things like that. And so I asked myself, why in the world would Jesus use this example, this crazy example of this vineyard owner who runs his business in crazy ways to represent how God, his Father, seeks to work in this world? Because what Jesus is basically doing with this parable of the vineyard is saying, this is how my Father runs his business in this world we live in. And his business is that of spreading his loving and gracious presence. And the world is like a vineyard. And my Father doesn't care who you are, where you come from, what you're dressed like, what you smell like, what you've done or not done. If you're willing to answer the call to go and work, he'll then discriminately just grab you and take you and say, hey, you're answering the call. Welcome to my divine presence, and now go and work. And he treats everybody the same. He treats everybody equally. There's no favoritism. You know, there's none of this stuff going on that you find out in the real working world. It's kind of mind-boggling when you think about it. It's countercultural, it's illogical, it's anti-instinctive, and it goes against the very grain of our human nature in the way that God seeks to run the business of furthering his divine presence in this world. And if you and I are willing to answer that call to be worker bees in his kingdom, in his business area of spreading the good news, we're going to be treated by this divine Father in ways that sometimes don't make sense to the rest of the world. That's what it means to be a disciple, I think. Isn't that right? Because God, in his own beautiful way, when it comes to us as worker bees, he levels the playing field. He literally levels the playing field in ways that we can't even imagine. You know, now it's football season. And if God's presence and his divine presence for the furthering of his kingdom was a football field, and we were the players on the field, there would be no goalposts. There would be no yard lines. There would be no people cheering in the stands. We would all be there equally on the playing field. There would be no quarterback. There would be no differences in the way God sees us. He would see us all the same. We wouldn't be competing against another team. We would only have one goal and one objective, and that's to further God's loving and gracious presence. It would be crazy. It would be a whole different playing field than what we're accustomed to when we watch, football on TV, where people are banging into each other and there's all this stuff going on. And the great thing about Steve, the Vietnam vet that I just talked about, is that he's the only quarterback that I ever blocked for. He's the only quarterback that I ever blocked for. Because at Elk Grove High School, I played 4 years of football, and God bless Steve, he was our quarterback. What a good-looking quarterback he was. Blonde hair, strong, tall, and I was a right guard, a pulling right guard. So I always tell Steve, remember, you're the only quarterback that I've ever blocked for. And he always says, you're probably the only, you're probably never going to block for another quarterback than we are now. As old as we are. And I said, yeah, that's true, but remember that. But, I remember playing football in high school, and I remember my father dropping me off at the first practice when I was a freshman in high school, and he says, you're going to go out for football. No, I don't want to go out for football. You're going out for football. You got to get involved in something. So he drops me off at practice, and for the first about 3 or 4 weeks, I just didn't want to be there. I didn't put out any effort or nothing. I was just there, kind of resisting the whole thing, kind of anti-father thing. I'm not gonna. And then about a month into practice and games, I was like the last person on the bench on the C team. I never got to play because I didn't care. But one day, and I probably told you this, Coach Mudge was a short little guy, and he always talked like that, and he always had spittle running down his mouth. And one day, when I was kind of just hitting the sled like like this instead of, Coach Mudge kicked me so hard with his, where, that I hit that sled so hard. Dawson, what are you doing? You've been sloughing for this whole month. You better get your ring air and get that. Oh man, something clicked. Because of Coach Mudge doing that, bam, into my derriere. And believe it or not, within 2 weeks, I was on the A team. I was starting on the A team, playing all the teams, all the offense, defense, all the different teams. And I got the most improved award for that year. And then I played, for the rest of the year, my junior and senior years and sophomore years, I was always on the starting team. But that's because of Coach Mudge, giving me that swift kick. But in God's playing field, there would be no Coach Mudge. Nobody kicking you into derriere. No most improved award. God doesn't play favorites. He doesn't. He treats us all the same, regardless of who we are. And I find that to be fascinating, because that's what His grace is all about. The leveling effect of His grace is just phenomenal. It's like God saying to us, I love you all the same. You're all workers in my kingdom. I'm going to treat you all the same. There's no favoritism. I'm not going to play the worldly games. Just help me further my divine presence. That's all I ask. And I'm not going to fire you or, just do your work if you can, in what ways God sees fit. It's the leveling effect. It's like God saying, the same amount of blood was shed for each and every one of you. When you come up for communion, you're not going to get more blood because you're a bigger sinner than this person over here. Wouldn't that be something if we gave more blood to each, a bigger cup, and the person who comes? But remember, the same amount of blood came out of Jesus. But think about it. Wouldn't that be, it says in the Bible, his blood was shed. It doesn't say, more blood was shed for these people versus those people. The same amount of blood came out of Jesus for the whole world and for every human being. And there's nothing in the Bible that says the cross was bigger for some people to bridge the gap between God and them than other people. Have you ever heard of a cross being bigger and longer to bridge a gap? No. The same size cross is for you and for me, utilized by Christ, because God treats us all equally as people who are sinners and yet blessed at the same time. And I just find that to be fascinating. Really fascinating. So we play on this leveling field, and when we're workers of his kingdom, we have to incorporate a different way of doing things as we try to further his love and grace and mercy and compassion and forgiveness in this world, because the world is not too friendly to God's ways. We have to find ways of doing God's business in the middle of the business of this world. Remembering that it's countercultural, it's illogical, it's anti-instinctive. Our ways of doing things as God's chosen people just doesn't make sense. It goes against the very grain of our human nature. But that's what we're called to do as players, as workers on God's field there. Just amazing. But he gives us the faith, he gives us the Holy Spirit, he gives us this new nature to go about doing what we need to do. For example, countercultural. The other day, a person that I've known for like 30 years posted some goofy stuff on Facebook. What people are doing on Facebook is absurd. I've known this person for 30 years. And he says, well, if you think this way and believe this way about what's going on in the country, you're either a racist, a loser, you don't know how to think for yourself, or you're just a dirtbag. I said, wow, those are 4 nice categories to put me in. You know, which one do I belong to? You know what I'm saying? Just kind of a carte blanche judgment of you. I mean, he wasn't saying it to me particularly, and I felt like Facebooking him back publicly and saying, well, hey, dude, you know, I've ministered to hundreds, thousands of people from all walks of life and races and creeds. You know what I did to them. And color, and regardless of their social position, regardless of how much money they made, I've cried with them, I've laughed with them, I've taken them in my car to places, I've given them money. I mean, it's just... And then I says, well, and I've got all these degrees, you want me to list? I mean, I felt like, and I've baptized, married, and buried people in your family. So what category would you put me in? I felt like putting that on Facebook. And I actually started writing it out. And of course, my wife says, put it on, yeah. Well, I mean, and that's okay. Because remember, I tell you, my wife sometimes is there kind of like a litmus test. And I decided not to, because it's because we're supposed to be countercultural. Culture would say, yeah, put it back to them, But you know what? It doesn't matter, because in the long run, what do you gain if you try to one up somebody else? It just doesn't make sense. What are you going to get? So that's countercultural. And then, of course, illogical. The other day, I had a son visit. That's what they're doing now in nursing homes. They're doing son visits. Isn't that right? You can't visit them inside, but you have to do what you call a son visit outside. And I had a son visit with Marion. I've known Marion for almost 15 years. She was up at this place in Arlington Heights called Church Creek. Nice little place, rehab center. And we had a son visit outdoors for about a half an hour. And I've known Marion for like 15 years. I buried her husband, Dick, and they were married for 58 years. Beautiful couple, just a wonderful, humble, great couple. You might remember Marion and Dick from St. Philip. And there she is, all crumpled and wrinkled up at 93 years old, just in pain because of rheumatoid arthritis, just surviving, because you know the co-vet, she doesn't get to see hardly anybody, just sits in a room. It's horrible. And she says, I said, so how's it going? She says, well, I can't wait to go see Dick. I want to die. And you know, the world would say, oh no, you can't support something like that. But as a worker in God's kingdom, I have to think, you know, illogically and say, oh yeah, Marion, that's okay. Because the world says we live in the land of the living, but God says, no, you live right now in the land of the dying, and you're going to the land of the living because of the resurrection. See what I'm saying? And that's illogical to the world and logical to us as workers of His kingdom. So there I supported Marion. I didn't say, well, yeah, I hope you die soon. But, you know, I just said, well, you know what? Well, you know what I'm saying. I said, oh, Marion, I understand. And we talked a little bit about how she missed her husband, Dick, and what a great guy he was. And you could just see that, you know, it was getting to be that time. And she was just waiting. And that's a beautiful thing, because we believe in life after death. See what I'm saying? So that's the countercultural and the illogical. And then anti-instinctive. And again, good old Facebook and emails and stuff like that. I shared with you not too long ago how somebody accused me of being political. You know? And you've known me for how many years? Have I ever been political in my preaching and teaching? Now, I may share some politics privately with people in conversation, but publicly, I've never been political, or I've never tried to push a particular perspective on a social agenda like capital punishment or homosexuality or all these hot topics. I've never done that, I don't think, you know. But this person, oh yeah. And again, she kind of classified me almost to the point of being anti-Christian, you know, because I'm not politically correct enough, and so we're not going to associate with you. I mean, and again, I shared with you the hurt. But my immediate instinctive reaction was to, bam! You know, send her back an email and say, hey, you know, whatever. You know, and to battle with her and to prove to her that she's totally wrong. But again, what's it going to accomplish? You see what I'm saying? What's it going to accomplish except to fan the flames? Instead, I just said, you know, sorry to hear about all this. If I've hurt you or done anything to you to cause you pain and suffering, I apologize. Never intended to do it. Have a good life. Still love you as a sister. You see? Because that puts the ball back in her court. Isn't that beautiful? We can further God's loving presence by just simple acts of choices that we make every day that are countercultural, illogical, anti-instinctive, and go against the very grain of our human nature. Human nature. You diss me, I diss you. Isn't that right, buddy? If you diss me, isn't that what it's all about? Yeah, I diss you. I mean, think about that. Isn't that how we live in this world? All the protest. I mean, you know, you diss me. Yeah, I know. If we just stop dissing each other, it'd be a whole lot better world. And that's what we're called to do as players and workers on God's fields in His kingdom. That's what Jesus is saying in this parable. God doesn't do things the same way, and you're called to work and act in a different way than what is normally expected, so we can achieve His purposes and not just our own, but human nature. So at work not too long ago, one of the boys there, who just turned 21, came up to me and said, hey, you know, I just blasted Margaret out there, who works in the fish counter. Yeah, I really got to her, man. You know, and Margaret's an older lady, you know, she's got a husband at home that's not doing well. And apparently she got on this young man's case a little bit. She dissed him. And so he dissed her back publicly. And she was just infuriated and bent out of shape. And I said to him, what's your mother going to say about this? And he says, well, she'll probably think I did the right thing. So then I said, what do you think God thinks about this? You know, because I've talked to him about the Lord, and he says, well, I don't know. But you see what I'm saying? I says, you know, what did you accomplish by dissing her back? Well, she dissed me first. Nobody going to disrespect me. Well, you know, I'm subtly trying to teach this kid that that's just not the way that it works if you're going to follow in the footsteps of the man upstairs. And it's a constant battle because we have to live and act in ways that are not normal in this world. And it's not easy to do that. It's not easy to do that. But God gives us the faith. He gives us the Holy Spirit. He gives us that new nature that we need to tap into to hopefully do what He wants us to do. Going back to my 69ers group, and this is something I want to share with you from a guy named Dan. Dan was, you know, one of my fellow graduates with me in 69, and he, nice guy, big guy, damn big guy, played football with us, and he spent his whole life working for a computer company, going out to all different countries, helping those countries work their computer systems better. Isn't that amazing? Making their situations better, but now he's retired. But he lost his daughter a couple of years ago to a brain tumor. And he wrote this and posts it every time they celebrate her birthday. He says, baby, why did you have to go? I know you didn't want to leave us so alone, but a greater calling you must address. Baby, why did you have to go? We were so blessed by your love. Your brightness was felt by all. Your smile would melt our hearts. And she was a beautiful girl. Oh, how we truly hated to part. Your story touched so many hearts. Your bright spirit lifted many up. Your determination provided strength to persevere. And your love touched us all. Your pain was felt by many, but you would never give in. Your sadness was deep inside you and was always kept within. You kept a wonderful smile that hid all your pain, and now you've left your body, and that pain does not remain. At times you feel so distant, others you seem so near. Where you are right now, baby, in our hearts that is very clear. And now you are angelic, and now you are so free. With God's love around you, in God's heaven you'll always be. Baby, why did you have to go? I know you didn't want to leave us so alone, but a greater calling you must address. Baby, why did you have to go? Why would you write those words if you did not believe in the resurrection? If he didn't believe in the resurrection, he wouldn't be writing those beautiful words. He would still be angry, mad, not saying he didn't have those days, but here he's expressing the beauty of his faith through these marvelous words with the rest of the world. Isn't that amazing? And that's what we can do, not, in any situation, regardless of what we're in, is to further God's loving and gracious presence, which He's doing here in the midst of something horrible and horrific as far as what a parent experiences. And then, of course, you got my buddy Tom, which I used to drink with. Tom was, I think, a starting tackle. Oh, no, he was the guy across from the center. What do you call him?
Nose guard.
Nose guard, yeah. He was the nose guard on defense. And big guy. But Tom and I used to do a lot of drinking in his 56 Chevy back in high school. a lot of Schlitz. Anyway, he sends me goofy stuff. Because, they can't believe I'm a pastor. That's the first thing. How many times have I heard that? I can't believe you're a pastor. But anyway, he sends me goofy jokes all the time, religious jokes. So here he sent me one, Tommy did. And he says, these friars were behind on their belfry payments, so they opened up a small florist shop to raise funds. Now, since everyone liked to buy flowers from the men of God, a rival florist across town thought the competition was unfair. He asked the good fathers to close down, but they would not. So he went back and begged the friars to close, but they ignored him. So the rival florist hired Hugh McTaggart, the roughest and most vicious thug in town, to persuade them to close. Hugh beat up the Friars and trashed their store, saying he'd be back if they didn't close up the shop. Terrified, they did so, thereby proving that Hugh, and only Hugh, can prevent florist friars. As far as in your Son's name we pray. Lord, we just thank you again for your presence in our lives, and help us to be worker bees in your kingdom, in your presence in this world, and to further it in ways that you see fit. Amen.